Whenever people find out that I've worked in the United Nations, that I've worked in war-torn countries and with refugees all over the world, the first question they want to know is, how did you end up at the UN? Tell me how to get there. I'm dying to get there. Just give me a tip. And so that's what I'm here to talk about to you today. Not exactly how to end up at the UN, but how you can end up doing what you were meant to do, what you want to do, and what you should be doing. But before I can answer that, when people ask me how I ended up at the UN, I need to tell them why I ended up there, why I do the work that I do, why I want to work with people in emergency and in devastating situations. So I start with this story. When I was a little kid, my mother took my brother and I to a musical. Now, our family, we didn't have a lot of money, so this was a really big deal. It was Les Miserables. And I remember the costumes and the singing and the theater. It was the most exciting night of my life. My brother and I were like little kids on Christmas Eve. We were giggling and singing and fidgeting in our seats. And I remember at the end of the night, it was a January night, it was really cold out. We sort of giddily darted off to our car to get in to go home. And we turned around and my mom was just sauntering across the parking lot, nice and slowly. So we started yelling, hurry up, let us in, we're cold. And so when she finally got to the car, she looks at us and she says, what's the problem? We said, Mom, it's January, we're cold, open up the door. She said, are you cold? We said, yeah, we're freezing, let us in. And she looked at us and she said, can you imagine that somebody has to sleep outside tonight? And it just hit me like a ton of bricks. I couldn't believe that I'd been singing and dancing and having the time of my life while somebody was braving that winter cold. And I think that's why I do the work I do, because I cannot reconcile that I have such a good life and so much fortune while people right beside me, not in some far-off country, are struggling so much. So when people ask me, how do I get a job at the UN? I tell them to worry less about getting a job at the UN and to do those small things that have meaning in your life. Because even if you don't end up at the UN, you'll be making a really meaningful contribution. So that's my first tip. Do something. While the idea of going off to another country, traipsing around and saving the world is something that we romanticize, most of us can't really do that. You know, I'm always surprised when we talk about people like Mother Teresa, a woman who literally picked children up out of gutters right before they were dying. We're all so inspired and so moved, but none of us can really imagine doing that for our whole lives. So what do? We make her a saint, and because we can't do everything she does, we do nothing. And I think that's our biggest problem. Because we can't do everything, we do nothing at all. So I guess my first tip is to do something small and meaningful in your community, and I can promise you it'll turn into something bigger. My favorite example of this is of the Secretary General of Doctors Without Borders. Her name is Marine Buissonnière, and when I first met her, this woman wowed me. She was bright, she was full of character and personality, she was extremely effective, and she was the fiercest and most passionate advocate I've ever met. We became friends, and after a little while, I had to ask the proverbial question, how do you end up as Secretary General of Doctors Without Borders? So she told me her story. She said that when she was young and living in France, she got a little restless. So she decided she'd try something new. She traveled to China. She liked it. It was something different and fun. And eventually she opened a small little pastry shop where she would sell French pastries and breads to local people. She was happy living in this little community. She learned fluent Mandarin and was living a happy life. One day, a young boy, who was from a group of street youth, came to speak to her. He asked her if she wouldn't mind at the end of the day if there were a couple of pieces of bread or pastries left if some of the boys that were street youth could have them. Marine stopped. She knew that if she said yes that day, she'd have to give these boys what was left over every day. But she didn't. So at first she started sort of giving them what was left over at the end of the day, and within a few weeks, she decided she could maybe make a couple of extra sandwiches for these guys. She started to get to know them better, and one night she said, you know, I wouldn't mind at night if you slept under the stoop of my store because nobody's there anyways, it wouldn't bother me. And then within a few weeks, she decided they could maybe sleep inside the store because no one was using it at night. As she got to know these kids better, she realized that they'd never done anything wrong, but had just had really, really difficult pasts and bad fortunes. So what she wanted to do was get them some sort of small apartment that they could maybe stay in the evenings. And she went to all the local organizations in the community to see if she could get some funding. One of them was Doctors Without Borders. Now, they didn't have funds to give her, but they were so moved by her passion and her love for these kids that they thought they could find her something else. They happened to need someone who spoke fluent French and fluent Mandarin to help them with some of the emergency needs that they had in the community. Maureen started working with them, and 12 years later when I met her, she was the Secretary General of Doctors Without Borders. She didn't get there by padding her resume with all of these impressive achievements. She just did something small, and more importantly, she did something that she loved. That brings me to my second tip. Contribute in your own way. Nobody else's but yours. I'm so saddened nowadays when I see that the way we're training young people is to follow some calculated recipe that will lead to this inevitable, wonderful end goal. So if somebody tells you they want to go to med school, we say, well, start tutoring or volunteer in your local hospital. Do whatever you can so that they know you're really excited about doing it. And I think these are all great things, and they do end up getting you to that end goal. But what I worry about sometimes is that when you get to that end goal, you might find out it wasn't what you really wanted in the first place. Larry Smith, who will be speaking later and is one of my favorite professors at the University of Waterloo, said something to me that changed my life. He said, "You better love what you do, because I guarantee you cannot compete with the person beside you that reads about business trends or health statistics or human resources on their weekends in their leisure time for fun." A few years later, I'm sitting with my best friend on the side of a lake. It's really quiet. We're on vacation. He's in human resources. He pulls out of his backpack this magazine and starts droning on and on to me about the wonders of e-recruiting. I couldn't believe it. He was reading about his career in human resources on the weekend for fun. So here's how you contribute in your own way. You find what you love doing, you find what you're good at, and you use that to contribute to your community. Here's another example I love. Now, you've all heard about the Doctors Without Borders. Most of us know that organization. How many of you have heard about the organization Clowns Without Borders? I swear to you, this exists. It is a group of people in North America that go to war-torn countries and to refugee camps and literally serve as clowns. Now, having worked in these areas, when I first heard about this organization, I was baffled. All I could think was, what these people need is food and shelter. They don't need clowns traipsing into their community. And then I read and learned more about what they do. One of the things that struck me the most when I worked in these countries and in these areas was working with malnourished children. When kids are so malnourished, when they're that malnourished, they don't have energy or any vitality, and no matter what you do, you can't get a reaction out of these kids. So you tickle them, you take them on plane rides, you tell jokes, you act crazy, and you cannot get children who are malnourished, that malnourished, to laugh. And these clowns come in, they put on a red nose, and they bring laughter into these communities. And more than that, when you look at the results, you learn that they're building self-esteem in children. They're getting children involved in theater, getting them to speak. They are building community. And if nothing else, for a few short moments, they're bringing laughter. So that's what I say, that if you can start somewhere and contribute in your own way, it will make a difference. My third tip is that in order to do all of this, you need to make sincere connections to people, to the community, to the earth. I think that most people that are here today want to dedicate some of their time to doing something, but don't really know where to start or how to get started. And so I say, pick something that you're genuinely connected to, and it'll grow. Here's my story. At the University of Waterloo, when I was here as an undergrad, I was a part of an organization called Habitat for Humanity. So what we do is on the weekends, every once in a while, we would go and help to build homes for people who couldn't afford them. And I have to tell you, while I loved the concept of putting a house up that somebody could live in, the best part was the amazing people that I met. So this group of people decided that we would participate in something called the Collegiate Build. So the Collegiate Build is when students decide that instead of going crazy on March break in some exotic area, they're actually going to commit to a week of service. Our group went to New Orleans. And we spent a week building houses, having fun, working really, really hard. But most importantly, when we were down there, we were allowed to build with the people that would actually be living in those houses. We got to know them, hear their stories, and I'd say become friends. 10 years later, I'm starting my master's in international development at Princeton. I'm so excited. I feel like a little kid in a candy shop again. And I'm there at orientation meeting all of these amazing people, and Hurricane Katrina hits the Gulf Coast and devastates New Orleans. I remember watching the images on TV of people that I had met, people that I felt I knew, literally drowning. And once again, I couldn't reconcile the fact that I was running off to picnics and meeting all these great people and staying up all night, and people in the country I was living were literally dying right beside me. And I decided I had to do something. I couldn't give up my master's, but I knew I could give a week. So during my break at school, I decided I would go down there. A bunch of students found out I was going and decided that they'd come with me. And we didn't really know what we were going to do, but we knew we could give our hands. So we get down there all excited, and at first, we're kind of just twiddling our thumbs. We start working in some local soup kitchens and asking around, saying that we're energetic and excited to work. And when people see that we're serious, they start to give us tasks. Before we know it, we're helping people clean out their flooded homes. We set up a makeshift medical center. We worked heavily in a soup kitchen, and we're handing out blankets and food. A local organization noticed us and asked us if we could conduct surveys of the survivors. So we went around and asked dozens of survivors what it was that they needed most. And we went to their local governments and asked them to provide those needs. One woman saw the work I was doing, and she came up to me and asked me what organization I was with. I said, I'm just a student. I'm only here for a week. We started talking, and she said that she was moved by my passion, my ability to organize, and that she could see me as somebody working in emergency relief. I didn't even know that was a career. And a year later, I found myself at the United Nations, not really knowing how I got there. So I can't tell you how to get a job at the UN, but I can give you 3 tips to do meaningful work. The first is to do something. The second is to contribute in your own way. And the third, and I think most important, is to make sincere connections. I want to end by sharing the most important lesson that I've learned. I think it's going to surprise you. I think in a lot of these talks, and including the stories I've given, we tell these stories about people that started with these little things, and they all became these grand endeavors. But I actually think that the little things are the ends in themselves. And I think that's what's important, is that no matter where it ends up, if you do something meaningful, it will matter. I know how busy you are as students, and I know how right now and most times you feel pulled in a million directions. But you will never be less busy than you are today. I promise you. You will have jobs, you will have families, you will have pets and houses and cars and so many things that will be pulling you in a million more directions. So whatever you're going to do, big or small, it needs to be today. You know that best friend I told you about in human resources? Many years ago when I was working at Covenant House Shelter, he came to see some of the work I was doing. He was so inspired by the way I could work with street youth and the work that the shelter does, But he said it just wasn't him. He didn't know if he'd feel comfortable or if he'd say the wrong thing. It just didn't seem like his environment. But soon enough, he came more and more. And about once a month, he started running a class for the youth. He taught them how to write resumes. He taught them how to interview. He taught them how to get jobs in the city. He used his skills in human resources to help in that situation. And years after I left Covenant House, he was still working there. It's now 10 years later, and my friend helps people in organizations all over Toronto, new immigrants, elderly people, people with very little means, to write better resumes, to interview better, so that they can work to feed their families. He didn't leave his full-time job. It's just something he does every once in a while when he has time. You know, when I started working for the United Nations, I had these big visions. I thought I'd be in a plane dropping packages of food onto people who need it, or at some big, amazing negotiating table as the lead ambassador. But I don't think that my future's at the UN. Turns out my mom got sick, and my dad got much older. And all of a sudden, I found myself wanting kids and a family, and wanting to have roots for the first time. I see my future in Toronto today. And I know that even if I don't end up at the UN, I will find some small way to make a contribution to my community. It may not make it on the front page of the paper, but I promise you that it'll matter. Let me ask you this. If I could give you all half an hour more this week, but I said to you that you have to use that half an hour to help somebody else, or to help something you're passionate about, the environment or animals. If I told you you could use it to write a letter to your grandma, to help somebody struggling in school, to teach a kid in your neighborhood how to play basketball, what would you do? What would you do if I told you that you could never put it on your resume and you could never tell anybody else that you did it? What would you do that has meaning to you? I challenge you to do that this week. Actually, I challenge you to do it today. And I promise you that if you do, that step will make the difference. In fact, it was Mother Teresa that said, do not try to do great things. Just do small things with great love. Thank you.